Today's topic is social media. Before we start, remember to subscribe and click the bell. And to find out more about being on a panel, click the link in the description below. We have a wonderful, very highly accomplished author panel with us today. Claire Fullerton is the author of Little Tea, Morning Dove, Dancing to an Irish Reel, and A Portal in Time. She hails from Memphis and now lives in Malibu, California with her husband, 3 German shepherds, and 1 black cat. Joanne Easley's debut novel, Sweet Jane, was a finalist in the 2019 Faulkner Wisdom Writing Competition. Midwest Book Review's Diane Donovan says, Sweet Jane's ability to take a family mystery and follow its roots and wings makes it an outstandingly warm read that is hard to put down and, like its protagonist, easy to love. Susan Z. Ritz lives in Montpelier, Vermont, the setting for her mystery A Dream to Die For. She is a teacher, a freelance journalist, and an advocate for women's economic equality. Currently, she's working on a memoir of the years she lived in Dachau, Germany. Kit Morgan writes historical and contemporary westerns and is the author of 100 books and counting. She also writes time travel adventures under Geraldine Beauchamp and has written a series by both pen names, combining her 2 worlds much to the delight of her readers. Joni M. Fisher writes suspense and crime novels. Her most recent book, West of Famous, is the 3rd in the Compass Crime series. Joni is an instrument-rated pilot and is on the Arts and Humanities Advisory Board for Southeast University. She lives in Central Florida and North Carolina. Marianne Willow is the author of The Grace of a Nightingale, a memoir of vulnerability, hope, and love, which is her debut book. With a background in nursing, she became a university lecturer in leadership and management. Now retired, she continues to write and enjoys walking in wild, beautiful landscapes. Welcome, everyone.
Nice to be here.
So the first question is, can you each tell us about your book?
I'll go first. My book is titled Little Tea. It's women's fiction and upmarket fiction, meaning it bridges the gap between literary fiction, which pays attention to language, and commercial fiction. And it's set in the Deep South. It's the story of 3 women friendships, long-lasting women friendships. And these women reunite for a long weekend because one of them's marriage is in crisis. And so 3 women, 3 different vantage points, 3 different personalities, all giving good counsel while at the lake in Heber Springs, Arkansas. And the backstory of the narrator who's telling the story entails growing up in Como, Mississippi with her best girlfriend who is black. The narrator is white, and it's set in the 1980s. And a story unfolds from the narrator's backstory as the 3 women are at the lake. And we come to find out that racism in the Deep South, even in the 80s, has not necessarily evolved to the point where we would assume that it has. And there are repercussions which the narrator is trying to resolve. And she does so through the story of Little Tea.
My novel, Sweet Jane, is a multi-layered tale. It has several themes: the mother-daughter relationship, addiction and recovery, childhood trauma, and love. It's ultimately a story of self-acceptance, and it's told in a dual timeline. We first meet the protagonist when she's a 6-year-old child trying to process her grandmother's death, and we meet all the people that are important to her in her life. The second chapter goes into current story time, which is 1984, and we see that she looks good on paper. She's married, she's in graduate school, she's a card-carrying member of AA. She'd never wanted to be like her alcoholic mother, but turns out she was. And she's hidden her entire past from her husband. When she learns of her mother's death, she goes back to Odessa, leaving her husband at home and in the dark about her entire history. And she's catapulted back to the events that made her the woman she is.
My book is A Dream to Die For, and it is a fun and kind of creepy mystery about a small town in northern New England, which is very much like the town that I live in. And the small town, the town's therapist is murdered, and the computer that contains the dreams and nightmares of half the town is stolen. So this suspicion immediately falls on the local bartender, Celeste Fortune, because she's known to be a rebellious member of the therapist cult. And she happened to be the one to find his body. But she grabs her friend Gloria, who was formerly also in the cult, and they decide they're going to go find who really did this. And on the way, there are car chases and more murders and lots of scenes from beautiful Vermont. And eventually, they discover that the power of the stolen dreams, as the dreams start to come to life around town, and you can imagine what that would be like to have your dreams presented to the world. So they discover who the real murderer is, and of course, and it's a lot of fun, but it's also got lots of twists and turns. It's got artists and magicians and musicians and a love interest. Celeste's boyfriend Jake and the therapist have been bitter enemies for a long time, so that she feels very torn between the therapist, who is her cult leader, and the love of her life. And it was really fun to write. Took me forever, and it's based partly on some personal experience. So it's been fun talking about it around town and out in the world.
Okay, my book is West of Famous, and it's about a young lady who takes a part-time job filling in for a celebrity who's hiding out in rehab. And she gets to party with their people and travel and go to all these fancy openings and clubs. And she's having the time of her life because she's not responsible for doing anything other than having a good time and being seen on social media. So when she's kidnapped out of a club, she really doesn't know what to do, because you certainly can't tell them, hey, I'm not who you think I am, because that would put a termination date on her immediately. So she's got to pretend to be this person she's actually never met. And one of the kidnappers is a big fan of hers, so it's a little dicey. So she's kept on a trawler, actually, in South Florida, out in the 10,000 Islands. So I had to do a lot of research out there to figure out where could you hide a trawler, and it was a blast. But the girl is actually a grad student from Oxford, and she looks just like the celebrity, and she can sing, but she's not asked to do anything like that. It was a lot of fun to do, and it's part of a 3-book series that has an ensemble cast that flows from book to book. And each book focuses on a different heroine whose life is turned upside down by a crime.
Hi, Mary-Ann Willow, author of The Grace of a Nightingale, which was published in April 2019. It's my debut book, which is my memoir, and it's a story of human vulnerability, love and hope. It traces stories of my life probably over about 50 years, and it begins with my earliest childhood memory, when at the age of 3 I witnessed my father beating my mother like a deranged baboon. It continues to describe how I grew up with abuse in different shapes and sizes, psychological, emotional, physical and sexual. I then go into describing how, as a wayward, wild teenager, I decided to consider my options for the future, which were fairly grim at the time. So those were prostitution, drugs and alcohol, teenage pregnancy, working in a factory, or becoming just homeless. Then, after an epiphany, I'd been to work in a hotel for a short while. I had an epiphany on the beach and decided to return home and train as a registered nurse. That then allowed me to recover and escape and travel and work across England in some of the most prestigious hospitals, including a cardiothoracic centre for heart-lung transplant surgery. It took me probably about 25 years to write this book. I felt called to write my story because I wanted to help other people. But life isn't tidy, and certain events got in the way, such as my mother was an alcoholic. I wanted to help her. I had 2 failed marriages, and I had a near-death experience from the insertion of surgical mesh. However, this isn't a misery memoir at all, I can assure you. There is a constant beckoning light of hope, beauty, forgiveness and reconciliation. And like all the best stories, there is a happy ending.
Thank you for sharing that, Marianne.
Well, my book is Dear Mr. Weaver. It is the first book in a series called Mail Order Bride Inc. And of course, it's about mail order brides. And the constant character that runs through the story is my matchmaker, who's totally nuts. She's cuckoo. And and they are comedies. I write with a lot of humor. And this particular book is basically the bride has horrible, horrible allergies. And my matchmaker, Mrs. Pettigrew, thinks the perfect husband for her is an apple farmer out in Washington. But to make matters worse, before she sends off the bride's return letter to the groom saying, okay, I'll do this, she adds just a little something at the end. And when the letter gets to where it's going, it gets picked up by the town gossip, who misinterprets what was written. And pretty soon, by the time the bride arrives, everybody's kind of looking at her like, ooh. And what the gossip misinterpreted, what she took it as the bride was a loose woman. And so all the men are kind of looking at her funny, and this goes on through the whole book, plus her allergies. Her future mother-in-law wants them to get married in the middle of the apple orchard in bloom. So it's just a comedy of errors that happens throughout the book. And that's basically what I write. A lot of my readers describe my books as Green Acres meets Gunsmoke.
So what are some of the opportunities and challenges that social media presents in your book marketing journey?
The challenges for social media, I think, are, especially during this pandemic, which is when we're recording this, really has been the oversaturation, I think, of so many people with such limited, forum capacity that heretofore, for me, and Little T is my 4th traditionally published novel, that a large part of my promotion was in person at book clubs and book festivals. And if you're asked to be a panelist, then it's worth your while to travel. But during this pandemic, you found that so many authors are on Facebook primarily, and there's been the advent of Facebook Live forums. And so what I've noticed on social media is about being there too often, and you posting yourself. And I think that it's one thing to post yourself about your book, and quite another when a reader, or perhaps even another author, will post for you. And so my dilemma has been, since my book has been out for 2.5 weeks, this last one, of now I'm sort of taking a step back just from Facebook and saying, it's lovely when people post about me, but for me to continuously post about the reviews that come in and this and that and the other, I've just decided to just say, okay, I'm not going to be posting. I'm going to be there and be commenting and thanking people. But as for posting myself, I far prefer it when people post about me. So I think it's an oversaturation and too much, I think, enthusiasm towards one's book. I think there needs to be, a line with that.
I agree with Claire. Facebook is saturated with so many live author events, and you want to help support your friends, but you can't attend every one. And besides on Facebook, there's Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, and your own website, all these outlets that you have to keep up with. So the challenge for me is keeping up with so many different outlets. And I think making a schedule to check in on each one is very helpful. The boon of the social media is you can reach people all over the world, all over the country. You can get new audiences and expand your reach. So I agree that right now, with our current situation, I much prefer the personal in-person events, all of which, of course, have been canceled. But I'm hoping to get back to them. And this fall, there should be some book events rescheduled.
It'll happen.
Yeah.
It'll happen for you, Joanne.
And you too, I hope.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really where people, because I know as a reader, I like to meet the authors whose books I love, because it means more to me then. I'll get a signed copy and I will cherish it because I've made a connection that's beyond just reading their stuff and loving it. And, you know, being able to meet people is fun. I did a book club once where it had to be long distance because the weather was too terrible. My plane couldn't get up there. So it was fun, but it's not the same. It's really not.
For me, the challenge was that I had no idea how to do social media in the beginning. I had Facebook, but I didn't know anything about Instagram or anything. And I met Claire, and Claire told me online is the place to be. So I figured it out. I had some help. But one of the things that I learned, first of all, yes, not posting a lot about yourself. Being a good literary citizen is important to support your friends and show everybody their books too, along with people who are reading your books, which is a great way to show it off. Get your friends to show their pictures with your book and what they're doing while they're reading it, which is often fun. But I think for me, it was a great new kind of creativity that I didn't find I'd never discovered before in myself, like setting up pictures and trying to come up with something that might grab somebody's interest in the myriad of social posts that go out every day. And funnily, I find cute girls reading my book are a big draw, and things that have nothing to do with my book. Like my biggest hit was 700 likes for a sign that some of my neighbor kids made that said, "Ghost hug, you can't feel it, but it's there." And I sent it out to everybody who's my followers and supporters. And that was the thing that people love the most. And so I think, again, you're right. It's people want to know who you are as well as what you've written. And the person behind the book is as important as the book. So getting that across is the challenge and also the fun part of it.
Yeah, Susan, you have a very beautiful Instagram timeline, and that's really great because you are so new to it. So she has a lot of very nicely staged photographs with her book.
Yeah, well, I was lucky I had the blog tour, and some great bloggers know how to do wonderful posts on Instagram, and I get to use those. And it looks like I've done something professional, but it was people who really do know what they're doing.
Was that blog tour free?
No, it wasn't free, but it was the best money I'd spent. It was Susie's approved book tours, and
They're wonderful.
Susie is the biggest cheerleader, supporter. I couldn't have gotten this thing off the ground without her, and I'm so grateful. And all of her bloggers, every time I've had a book bug deal or something like that, which are also great social media things,
Yes.
they've posted for me, and they know how to do things like Canva that I don't know how to do. They know how to set it up so it looks like a real Instagram shot, and then it makes my whole page look so much better. So it's not just one person doing, you're not your only social media poster. You're not the only person who can help your book. And so relying on other people is probably more important than your own creativity in the end.
Agreed.
Yes. As an indie, I find that I have to make a lot of my own graphics, and I am not that good at it, but I found a few software things that help me size it properly. This is the size for Instagram. This is the size for Facebook. This is the size for Twitter, because they're all different. And if you don't have your text and your backgrounds correct in there, it'll be cutting off half the words, or the image of the book will, be halved. So a lot of those things make life easier for those of us who are not, programmers and technical wizards.
What's your software?
I use Design Wizard
Okay.
because
Good
it has the pre-made sizes for each of the things. That way, if I have a new book coming out, I can make my ads or make my posts to introduce it, and they'll all fit. And I know that they will fit.
It's great.
Is Design Wizard a software or a website?
It's a software program. It's you click on it and you go there and you make your stuff on there and then you download it.
So it's an online software.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, you just gave them a good promo.
Yeah.
Well, I had to find something idiot-proof because I'm not that good at graphic art, and graphic art is, I think, a challenge.
I think for me the challenges have been I have neither the inclination nor the capability for getting my head around social media until my book was published April last year, and the publisher dropped the bombshell, you're going to need a social platform. And I wasn't on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, any of them. I wasn't remotely interested. And a bit like, someone said earlier, they were tired of themselves. I was very tired of myself, believe me. I'd spent 25 years writing about myself. And the last thing I wanted to do was to continue to describe myself through social media. Anyway, we had to get our act together, and I say we, my husband is the one that's helped me enormously. He was involved in designing the book cover. Well, in fact, he did design it, so he's got some graphic background, and he was on social media for other reasons, so he very quickly set up various accounts, and I'm still at the beginning of that journey. I find it utterly draining, tiring, exhausting. I'm sorry, I also find it boring, but particularly when it comes to talking about myself. I'd rather be out on a dog walk in a forest somewhere or having a glass of wine. I certainly don't want to be on Instagram telling somebody I've made a cake today.
That would never be me.
Sorry, I'm not interested. And the older I get, the more I crave silence. So anyway, to cut a long story short, I am on social media, and I do it purely through my pseudonym on behalf of my book. I do limit kind of private information, so you don't get to know I've made a cake today, and you don't get to know I've made a loaf. But you will get maybe a little, quote from the book and some relevance to maybe what's going on in the world. So given the pandemic, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Florence Nightingale founded nursing in this country.
Yes.
We've got, Nightingale in the title of my book, and that's for a range of reasons, but partly because I'm a nurse, and we've just set up 3 hospitals in response to the virus over here, and we call them Nightingale. So I've made connections which are relevant, helpful, meaningful, and not just because I want to talk about myself, basically. Right. So
nice.
Beautiful.
So that's my limited view of social media.
But you have to have it, and it works. I've met readers through Instagram. I've noticed that in the last,
really,
I'd say 6 months, that people have understood, what my last release is about, and, have bought the book and have told people. So it ends up being a wonderful way to get word around you. But I think that an author has to have a healthy perspective.
Yeah.
Not take it so seriously and have fun with it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, back to what Susan was saying earlier when she got 700 likes on her one post that had nothing to do with the book, that I heard a long, long time ago that when you write fiction, you're not selling your book. It's all about you. You sell yourself. And so they are very interested in what you do outside of just writing. They love to be interactive with you. My book that released April 30th, I let them pick and create the names of villages. And I have a lot of social media. I have 5 Facebook pages I have to manage because I have 2 pen names. But what I make sure I do is that they're interactive with the readers. So when I started audiobooks, I let them listen to samples narrators were sending me. They actually picked my narrator. I let them pick town names and character names. And so it's very, very interactive. And so they are actually a part of my writing world. And we'll play games together. We'll have Pictionary nights sometimes. We know each other. And so they've gotten to be friends, and I don't have to talk about my books. Yeah, so they like to be interactive and get to know you. Your books are just a byproduct of you, but you're selling yourself. And so this does mean that they do like to see what you're eating and baking. All of that sort of thing. And I don't necessarily post every day in every single one because I have a group I manage. I have 2 author pages, and then I have Kit Morgan and Geraldine Beauchamp both have a personal page where a lot of the readers are on my friends list and this sort of thing. I'll post snippets from a book I'm working on, and they'll ask questions, and so it's constant interaction, but it's not necessarily about books.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily every day on every single page.
Yeah, I find that readers are interested in more than just the story itself. I have some readers who ask me for the deleted scenes, so I've posted some of those. The fun part of the writing process for me is the research. I get to try new things. I get to meet experts in different fields. I got to field strip an M16. I got to live on a trawler for a week. So that's the kind of thing I feel really good about sharing with my readers, because it gives credit to these experts who have helped me find the information I need to make the story real and credible. And they are real people, and they're far more interesting, I think, than me, because I'm just gathering, this information and making a story out of it, whereas they live this. Whether they're in law enforcement or whatever their hobby or career is, they're going to be so excited about sharing that information that comes across to the readers as fun and authentic and something they wouldn't know. Like, I still can't secure a boat to a dock decently, but I did spend a week on a trawler and learned my starboard from my aft, so to speak. So that was fun. That made it fun, and I think the readers would enjoy that as well.
Definitely.
Joni, how did you find these people to use as resources?
I went out on social media and I said, hey, I am doing my next book about a boat. I'm looking for a trawler. I live in Florida and North Carolina. Is there anyone that can let me walk on their boat and ask a million stupid questions and not be annoyed by it? This lady who also happens, I've known her for a long time, and she's also a reader of mine. She and her husband just bought a trawler, and they were on their shakedown cruise after they bought it, and they were in Florida. So I said, oh my God, could I come see your boat? And they said, you can come stay with us for a week. So I packed up and I'm good to go. My big concern was, if they're going to go from, say, Tampa down to Miami, am I going to be stranded in Miami and have to find a way back? But they basically went from where they bought the boat down south into the 10,000 Islands and back. But that kind of thing is really fun, because then the readers can guess, well, which island is it? And if they've been out to those 10,000 islands, I can tell them exactly which island where we dropped anchor and we started staging some of the scenes, and they'll be just they'll know exactly where it is and they can go there if they want. And it was creepy because the couple that owned the boat, I wanted it to be a place so remote that if you screamed, nobody would hear you. So they told me to go on top of the boat and scream my head off, and I did, and it was so creepy. So that kind of thing I think is more exciting and fun to show on social media than me, because my excitement is I'm learning something so different, so cool, and I'm learning it from people that really know it. They're experts. And I think the readers like that too, because now they're going to look for I've had readers say, oh, I've seen that boat, because it was doing the loop where they loop the eastern United States. They go up the coast and they go through the waterways and back down to the Gulf. And this group of loopers are people that live on boats and do that all the time. So now I've tapped into that community, and they invited me to do a book signing at their convention. So,
Fun.
I mean, I'm not a boater, but here I am at a boating convention meeting all these people.
At this point, one of our panelists dropped off the call and was unable to rejoin, so I want to thank everyone for sharing, and to all our viewers, don't forget to subscribe and also check out the panelists' YouTube channels linked in the description below. Little T, Sweet Jane, A Dream to Die For, Dear Mr. Weaver, West of Famous, and The Grace of a Nightingale are available on Amazon, links below, as well as links to each panelist's website. Thank you so much for being with us today.